A broken axe was worth exactly half a dead arm in ancient times. You are Grug. Your tribe is hungry. Your spear is dull. And you need to trade. So how did Grug get what Grug needed before money? Life for Grug was complicated. Your apartment was a cave. Your landlord was a saber-toothed cat. And your grocery store was whatever you could hit with a rock. You didn't have a boss, but you did have a very strict daily deadline: survive. Every sunrise was a lottery ticket, and the prize was not dying. Fun. Imagine this. You spent 3 days carving the perfect spear. It's pointy. It's balanced. It would look great in a museum if museums existed. But you forgot to gather berries, and now your stomach thinks your throat is a liar. The hunter next door has berries, but his spear is basically a fancy stick. This was the original situationship. You both had something the other wanted, but how do you make it fair? This, my friend, was the birth of money. Not coins. Not paper with a dead president's face. Something much, much weirder. The first use of money was not for buying things. It was for making trades less awkward. Before standardized currency, early forms of money included valuable commodities like shells, salt, or livestock, used for bartering and trade to simplify transactions. Because Grug can't just give you half a berry for half a spear, that's just gross. Let's count down some of the truly wild ways ancient humans said, "This is worth that." Number 1, salt. Yes, that white stuff you put on your fries. To ancient humans, salt was liquid gold. It wasn't just for making your mammoth jerky taste better, it was essential for preserving food. Imagine trying to keep meat fresh without a fridge. You couldn't. Unless you had salt. So, if you had a big chunk of salt, you were basically a billionaire. Roman soldiers were even paid in salt, that's where the word salary comes from. Grug was paid in salt once. Grug tasted his paycheck. Grug immediately regretted it. Tasted like dirt and regret. Number 2, livestock. If you had a goat, you were rich. If you had 5 goats, you were basically Jeff Bezos with horns. Goats, sheep, cattle, these animals weren't just food, they were walking, breathing piggy banks. You could trade them for tools, for land, or even for a spouse. Imagine explaining to your parents that you traded your best cow for a date. Grug once tried to pay for a new fishing net with a very old, very grumpy chicken. The chicken did not approve. The chicken bit Grug. Grug's still mad about the chicken. Number 3, shells. Specifically, cowrie shells. These pretty little things were found in the ocean, and because they were rare in many inland areas, they became incredibly valuable. They were durable, easy to carry, and hard to counterfeit. You couldn't just carve a fake cowrie shell in your cave. Grug tried. It looked like a very sad pebble. Nobody was fooled. People even wore them as jewelry, which was basically showing off your bank account on your neck. The original flex. Number 4, obsidian. This shiny, volcanic glass was the sharpest material available. Perfect for arrowheads, knives, and very regrettable shaving attempts. If you lived near a volcano, you were sitting on a gold mine. If you lived far away, you had to trade for it. Think of it like the ancient equivalent of a diamond, beautiful, dangerous, and everyone wanted one. Grug saw obsidian once. Grug tried to pick it up. Grug cut finger. Grug learned. Obsidian good for cutting, bad for touching. Number 5, feathers. In some cultures, particularly in parts of the Americas, brightly colored feathers from rare birds were highly prized. They were beautiful, lightweight, and represented status. Imagine trying to explain to your family why you spent a week's worth of rations on a feather. But it's so vibrant, you'd say. It makes my headdress pop. And they'd look at you like you just traded the last mammoth steak for a shiny rock. Grug saw a really cool feather once. Grug chased bird. Bird flew away. Grug fell in mud. Feather gone. Grug still sad about the feather. Number 6, grain. If you could grow food, you had power. Grains like wheat and barley were not just sustenance, they were a stable, measurable form of wealth. You could store it if rodents didn't get to it first, and you could trade it. This was the OG mutual fund. I have 5 sacks of barley, you'd say, puffing out your chest. That's like a lot of barley. This was how you afforded a better cave, or maybe even a slightly less grumpy chicken. Now, here's the crazy part. What happens when your money is alive? Imagine trying to buy something with a cow that decides to run away mid-transaction. Or a bag of salt that gets soaked in a rainstorm. The system had flaws. Huge, hilarious flaws. And then there were the negotiations. Imagine you want a new club. Your club is just a stick. This guy has a club with a pointy rock on the end. Fancy. You offer him 3 fish. He says, no, 4 fish and 1 very shiny pebble. You counter with 3 fish, the pebble, and your firstborn's future fishing rights. It's like a really intense garage sale, but with higher stakes. And if you didn't agree, you either walked away empty-handed, or you just took the club. Which was not recommended. That's how you ended up with a broken arm. Which, remember, meant you were now a snack for a wolf. And it gets worse. What about fake money? You can't counterfeit a goat, right? Well, you could try to pass off a sick goat as a healthy one. Or a bag of grain that's half dirt. It was like ancient identity theft, but with more animal smells. People would spend years building a reputation for honest trading, only for some trickster to ruin it all with a bad deal. Grug once bought a magical healing root that turned out to be just a stick. Grug was still sick. Grug was also very mad. These early forms of currency were revolutionary, but they were also incredibly inefficient. Every transaction was a negotiation, every item had a subjective value, and every trade was a risk. It made life hard. It made bartering like ancient dating. You just kept trying until you found a match, or you just gave up and stayed home with your sad, dull spear. It was the original swipe right for salt. So, the next time you tap your phone to pay for something, remember Grug. Remember the struggles. Remember the goats. And remember that for Grug, a broken axe was once a very complicated, very important problem. And a broken axe could lead to a broken Grug. Grug's still mad about the mammoth that got away because Grug's spear was dull. Next time, Grug explain why Grug hate Tuesdays. And these early forms of money weren't just for everyday survival. They were also how ancient humans dealt with the biggest transactions of all. Like, buying a new cave? Or, settling a blood feud? That required serious capital. Take, for example, the tradition of bride price. Before marriage licenses and awkward family photos, if Grug wanted to marry another Grug, Grug often had to pay the bride's family. Not with a diamond ring, but with a herd of cattle, a pile of shells, or even several bundles of prized feathers. It was less about buying a person and more about compensating the family for the loss of their daughter's labor and showing that Grug was a capable provider. Imagine explaining that to your modern fiancé. Honey, instead of a ring, I traded 2 goats and a particularly shiny rock for you. Not exactly romantic, but very practical. Grug once tried to pay a bride price with a single, very enthusiastic badger. It did not go well. Grug got scratched. Grug remained single for a long time after that. Then there was the issue of storage. Where do you keep your wealth? You can't just put your 20 goats in a safety deposit box. They eat your deposit box. And your savings. And probably your neighbor's savings too. So, your bank was often a sturdy pen, or a very deep hole, or just your watchful eyes. This made you a prime target for theft. A modern robber might take your wallet. An ancient robber might take your entire livelihood, kicking and screaming, with horns. Grug once stored his precious salt in a hollow tree. A bear found it. The bear ate the salt. The bear then had very high blood pressure and an intense craving for more salt. Grug learned his lesson: bears are not good investment bankers. The inherent instability of this commodity-based money meant that prices fluctuated wildly. One year, salt might be worth a lot because of a good harvest and demand for preservation. The next, a new salt deposit is discovered, and suddenly your salty fortune is barely worth a handful of berries. It was the original stock market crash, but instead of losing numbers on a screen, you lost actual, living animals. Or your food went bad. Or you couldn't trade for a new spear. Grug once saw a man trade 3 excellent furs for a single piece of amber. The next week, everyone found huge amber deposits, and the man's trade was basically worthless. He looked very sad. Grug understood. Grug also liked shiny things. And what about the concept of change? If your money is a cow, and you want to buy a small basket of mushrooms, how do you get change? You can't just lop off a leg. That's a different kind of transaction entirely. This led to very complex bartering, often involving multiple intermediate trades. You might trade your cow for 10 chickens, then 3 chickens for a bag of grain, then a handful of grain for the mushrooms. It was like going to the ATM, but the ATM was a chain of increasingly confused animals and people. Grug tried to buy a new loincloth with 1 sheep. The seller offered a partial trade, half the sheep for the loincloth, plus 2 small rocks and a very suspicious-looking feather as change. Grug said no. Grug did not trust the feather. Grug still wears the old loincloth. It has character. Disease was another huge factor. Imagine your entire life savings is a herd of sheep. Then a plague sweeps through, and suddenly your net worth drops faster than a rock climber without a rope. All your money dies. You are left with nothing but very smelly carcasses. This wasn't just losing money, it was losing your ability to survive, to feed your family, to replace your dull spear. It was economic devastation on a scale we can barely imagine today. Grug once knew a tribe that had a lot of strong goats. Then the goats all got a strange cough. Soon, the tribe had no goats. The tribe also had a lot of goat coughs. It was a bad time. This constant need for negotiation and the physical nature of these early currencies also affected social structures. Who had power? The person with the most valuable goods. Not necessarily the strongest warrior or the wisest elder, but the one with the biggest herd or the most salt. This created hierarchies. You could become rich through hard work, smart trading, or simply by living in a place with a valuable resource, like an obsidian mine. The rich were often the ones who could afford more luxury items, like decorative shells or unusually vibrant feathers, which reinforced their status. It was the ancient version of driving a fancy car, except your fancy car could graze on grass. But here's another twist: what if your money was something that could expire? Grain could rot. Meat could spoil. Even salt, if not kept dry, could dissolve. So, you were always in a race against time. This encouraged constant trade and consumption, because holding on to certain forms of wealth for too long was a losing game. It was the ultimate use it or lose it economy. You couldn't just sit on your grain pile forever. Unless you wanted a very moldy, very useless grain pile. Grug once tried to save a massive pile of berries. Grug forgot about them. The berries turned to mush. Grug was sad. Grug ate the mush anyway. It was interesting. The lack of universal value also meant that trade networks were essential. If your tribe specialized in making excellent flint tools, but you needed furs, you had to find a tribe that had furs and wanted tools. This led to complex relationships and alliances between different groups, sometimes across vast distances. Traders became incredibly important, traveling with their goods, risking dangerous journeys to connect different economies. These early traders were the original entrepreneurs, building bridges between communities. And sometimes, those bridges were built on a foundation of salt or shiny shells. So, while we often think of money as coins and bills, its true origin is far more primal. It wasn't invented to make us rich, but to make life a little less chaotic. To transform a world of awkward bartering into something just slightly more predictable. From the chaotic give and take of a broken axe for half a dead arm, to the structured exchange of valuable commodities, ancient humans were constantly innovating ways to simplify their complicated lives. And for Grug, these innovations were not just about convenience, they were about survival. They were about the difference between a full belly and an empty one. Between a sharp spear and a blunt stick. Between being a predator and being prey. Grug's still mad about the mammoth that got away because Grug's spear was dull. Next time, Grug explain why Grug hate Tuesdays.